Welcome to the Midnight Narrator, where the hour is late and the stories run deep. Tonight we delve into a chilling tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat, The Game of Whispers. A seemingly innocent discovery turns into a test of courage, secrets, and the unknown. Are you ready to play? Let's begin. I can barely recall a time before we discovered the game that sweltering July night. The air hung heavy and humid, refusing to offer any respite from the relentless summer heat. We were 6 secondary school students, wilting under the weight of boredom and the impending pressure of university applications. Most of us held down part-time jobs, diligently saving every penny, hesitant to squander our hard-earned cash on fleeting entertainment. After what felt like an eternity of fruitless debate, we decided on a whim to explore our quiet suburban neighborhood on foot. It was the tail end of the weekly community market, vendors hastily dismantling their stalls and retreating indoors, their voices echoing across the emptying square. A few stragglers remained, desperate to offload their remaining wares before packing up for the night. We hadn't intended to purchase anything, but I always found myself drawn to these events, sifting through the discarded trinkets and forgotten treasures. My fingers traced the edges of a chipped ceramic cat, a relic from a previous market whim. It sat on my shelf at home, a silent testament to my poor impulse control. But still, the naive hope of uncovering some extraordinary find lingered. That night, my attention was captured by a dusty cardboard box overflowing with old board games. I thought I might unearth a new diversion for our group, and given the late hour, I hoped to snag a bargain. Initially, I only encountered games in a state of disrepair or titles I knew my friends wouldn't enjoy. I'd always been a devotee of tabletop games, but my friends, with the exception of maybe one or two, were less enthusiastic. I'd practically begged them for months to join my Dragons and Dungeons campaign, and they only relented for my birthday. I was constantly on the lookout for a game that might finally capture their interest. Just as I was about to abandon my search, a game at the bottom of the box caught my eye. The Whispering Game, the box proclaimed in faded, almost ghostly lettering with the tagline, "A pastime that will bind you closer than ever before." The box itself was a riot of faded colors, depicting shadowy figures huddled together, their faces obscured by darkness. It showed signs of wear and tear, the corners frayed and the cardboard slightly warped, but it didn't appear damaged beyond use. It simply looked well-loved or perhaps well-used. I tried to open it, but the edges were firmly sealed with old, yellowed tape. The tape itself was brittle and cracked in places, as if it had been sealed and reopened many times. There was no price tag in sight, so I approached the stall owner, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes who was busy consolidating her remaining items into larger crates. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tinged with anticipation. "How much for this game?" I held up the brightly colored box, which notably lacked any company branding or trademarking. "Oh, that old thing?" she replied, barely glancing at it. "I don't know. Have you got a single dollar?" Her casual response filled me with hope. I rummaged through my bag, searching for a loose bill. Sensing my hesitation or perhaps simply wanting to be rid of the item, she waved her hand dismissively and said, "Just take it, dear." She immediately turned back to her packing. "So, is it any good?" I asked awkwardly, feeling a twinge of unease. "I've never actually played it," she admitted, her back still to me. "A friend, Martha, gave it to me a few years back. Her kids were obsessed with it for a while, and she was just looking to get rid of it. Said they played it constantly, even when she told them not to. She thought my family might enjoy it, but we never got around to it." She paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "She did mention they started acting different after they played it a few times. More secretive, I suppose, kept to themselves, stopped talking to each other as much as they used to." I thanked her and called my friends over, eager to show them my acquisition. Andrew's shoulders slumped. Clara rolled her eyes and sighed. "Liam, you know we're not really into that kind of thing," Andrew said, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "Come on, guys," I pleaded. "You've all been complaining about being bored all day. Just give it a try. I've never played this one before, so we can all learn the rules together." I saw a flicker of renewed interest in their faces. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward and took the box from my hands. As he examined the box, his eyebrows, initially furrowed in a frown, slowly arched upwards. A flicker of something akin to excitement lit his eyes. "Actually," he said, a strange excitement creeping into his voice, "this looks interesting. Let's give it a go." He started walking briskly towards his house with me trailing close behind. The rest of our group, Clara, Andrew, Nathan, and Sarah, lagging behind, exchanging bewildered glances. We arrived at Ethan E.'s house and entered to find his mother looking equally perplexed by her usually stoic son's sudden burst of enthusiasm. The air in the entryway smelled faintly of dust and old furniture. As we stood awkwardly unsure of how to explain the situation, we heard Ethan calling us from the basement. The creaky wooden steps groaned under our weight as we descended into the dimly lit space. The basement smelled of damp concrete and something faintly metallic, a scent that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The game was meticulously laid out on the worn carpet. Ethan was perched on a beanbag chair, his brow furrowed in concentration as he devoured the instruction manual. A single bare bulb hung from the low ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. "Ethan, are we seriously doing this?" Clara groaned. "Yes, we are," he insisted, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Trust me, you'll have fun. I've had a chance to familiarize myself with the rules while you guys were getting here." He shuffled a deck of cards, a strange glint in his eyes. "The basic premise is simple. You draw a card and it gives you a task. Some are public, meaning you perform them for the group. Others are private and you have to keep them secret. The catch is, you have to start with the person who last told a lie." After a few minutes of good-natured grumbling and reluctant compliance, everyone settled down around the game. Ethan cleared his throat and began to explain the rules, reading directly from the worn instruction booklet. The rules were written in a strange, almost archaic style with phrases like "prithee" and "hark." It added to the unsettling atmosphere. Ethan carefully folded the instruction sheet and placed it beside him, asking if anyone had any questions. No one spoke. The air felt thick with anticipation and a growing sense of unease. "All right, let's get this show on the road," Ethan declared. But he was met with blank stares. "Come on, guys, I just explained the rules. We have to start with the person who last told a lie." A heavy silence descended upon the group. No one was eager to confess their recent deceptions. "This is ridiculous," Clara finally blurted out, breaking the tense silence. "Fine, I'll go. I told my mom that Nathan wasn't with us when I left the house. There, I'll go first." She reached forward and picked a card from the deck. As she read it, her eyes widened slightly, and a faint blush crept up her neck. The card read, "Public, imitate a crow for 3 minutes." She rolled her eyes. "This is so stupid. Why are we even playing this game?" "Come on, Clara, it can't be that bad," Nathan said, sensing her embarrassment. "Can you read it aloud?" "Ugh, public card. Imitate a crow for 3 minutes," she groaned, throwing the card down, and looking at Nathan, who was seated to her right. She clearly expected her turn to be over and was reluctant to even attempt the task. The rest of the group, however, erupted in laughter and encouragement, chanting her name and begging her to do it. After about a minute of playful resistance, she finally gave in, getting down on her hands and knees. She started with a half-hearted caw, her face flushed. But as the timer ticked down, fueled by our laughter and cheers, her performance grew more enthusiastic. She flapped her arms, bobbed her head, and let out a series of surprisingly convincing caws. By the time the 3 minutes were up, she was laughing uncontrollably, continuing the imitation for a few seconds longer out of sheer amusement. The tension in the room had dissipated, replaced by a sense of shared camaraderie. "That was actually kind of fun," she exclaimed, giggling. "Someone move my token up 1 space. Nathan, it's your turn." Nathan looked at her in disbelief. He was accustomed to her reserved personality and was pleasantly surprised by the change this game had brought about. He picked up his card, his fingers trembling slightly. He then mimed, zipping his lips shut, and shook his head, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that reflected in the sudden pallor of his skin. The card slipped from his trembling fingers and fluttered to the worn carpet. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A bone-chilling draft swept through the basement, raising goosebumps on my arms. The single light bulb above us flickered violently, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist on the damp concrete walls. From somewhere above us, a floorboard groaned, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden silence, as if something heavy had just shifted its weight. I picked up Nathan's card. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the faded words. "Private. Name the person you secretly resent the most in this room." Nathan stared at the card, his face pale and clammy. He looked around at each of us, his gaze lingering on Ethan for a moment, then quickly darting away. He shook his head again, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't speak, as if an invisible hand had clamped down on his throat. He looked trapped, caught in a terrible internal struggle. Then the lights flickered and died completely, plunging the basement into absolute darkness. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by a moment of stunned silence. Then we heard it. A faint whispering, too quiet to understand, seeming to come from all directions at once. It was a low, sibilant sound, like dry leaves rustling in a cold wind. Yet it seemed to emanate from within the very walls of the basement. A cold spot settled in the center of the room, so intense that I could see my breath puffing out in front of me. When the emergency lights flickered on a few seconds later, casting a sickly yellow glow, Nathan was gone. The basement door, which we were sure had been closed and even latched, was now slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning from the other side. Panic erupted. We scrambled to our feet, bumping into each other in the confined space. We searched the house, calling Nathan's name, our voices growing increasingly frantic, but he was nowhere to be found. Ethan's parents, alerted by our commotion, joined the search, equally baffled and concerned. They checked every room, every closet, even the attic, but there was no sign of Nathan. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The next day, Nathan reappeared. He was found wandering in a park miles from Ethan's house, disoriented and confused. He was sitting on a bench, staring blankly ahead, his clothes damp and his eyes bloodshot. He had no memory of what had happened after he drew the card. He just remembered the lights going out and then waking up in the park, the first rays of dawn painting the sky. We were all deeply shaken by the experience. We tried to talk about it, to make sense of what had happened, but a strange tension hung in the air, a thick veil of unspoken fear and suspicion. We started keeping secrets from each other, small at first, but they grew over time, festering like hidden wounds. Clara became withdrawn, constantly looking over her shoulder as if she were being watched. Andrew became irritable and quick to anger, snapping at us for the slightest perceived slight. Ethan, once the driving force behind playing the game, became unusually quiet and avoided our gaze, a haunted look in his eyes. I found myself obsessively replaying the events in my mind, searching for an explanation, for some logical reason for Nathan's disappearance and reappearance, but finding none. One evening, weeks after the incident, I visited Ethan. He was sitting alone in his basement, the game box open on the worn carpet, the cards scattered around him. He looked up at me, his eyes now devoid of the initial excitement they had held that fateful night, replaced by a chilling emptiness. "It's not just about secrets," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It feeds on the gaps between us, the things we don't say. It makes them real. It gives them form." He showed me a page from the instruction booklet we had missed before. It was tucked away, almost hidden, folded neatly beneath the main rules and written in smaller, faded print. It described the Whisperer, a creature that existed in the spaces between words, thriving on unspoken resentments, hidden fears, and the unspoken truths that festered in the darkness of our hearts. The game, it said, was not just a game. It was a ritual, a carefully constructed mechanism designed to summon the Whisperer, to give it a foothold in our world. We tried to burn the game, to destroy the cursed object that had brought so much fear and discord into our lives, but the flames wouldn't catch. The box remained untouched, as if protected by some unseen force. The fire danced around it, licking at the edges but refusing to consume it. Finally, in desperation, we buried it deep in the woods, far from any houses or roads, hoping to be rid of it forever. Years passed. We drifted apart, the shared trauma of that night a silent barrier between us. I occasionally heard whispers about the others. Clara had moved away to another city, seeking a fresh start. Andrew had dropped out of university, unable to cope with the stress and the lingering fear. And Ethan had become a recluse, rarely leaving his house, a prisoner of his own guilt and the lingering presence of the Whisperer. One rainy afternoon, years after we buried the game, I received a package in the mail. There was no return address. It was a small, battered cardboard box, familiar in its worn edges and faded colors. Inside, nestled amongst some faded tissue paper, was a single playing card. It was blank, completely devoid of any markings. On the back, in faded, almost ghostly lettering, were 3 words: "Let's play again." A cold dread washed over me, a chilling realization that the Whisperer hadn't been confined to the basement, or even to the game itself. It had found a way to follow us, to wait patiently in the shadows, feeding on our fear and the unspoken secrets that continued to haunt us. And so the whispers remain unanswered, lingering in the shadows waiting for the next daring soul. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling story, let us know in the comments below. What would you do if you found the Whispering Game? Don't forget to hit that like button if this story gave you goosebumps, share it with your fellow night owls, and subscribe to The Midnight Narrator for more stories that keep the midnight oil burning. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and never stop listening to the whispers of the night. Sweet dream, if you can.